we're back to talk more about Dr. Livingstone, I
Part
presume.
two of,
Yes.
yes.
So we'll do a quick recap, but if you have not listened to part one, you might want to go back and listen to part one of the Henry Morton Stanley Dr. Livingstone set.
They are two fine, upstanding individuals, of which nothing interesting happened.
Okay, so basically...
Wait.
What?
Who are you?
Oh, I'm Tina.
I'm Chris.
Okay, and this is Fantastic Footnotes.
And what should you do?
I don't know, what should you do? Oh, you should go to Substack.
And YouTube.
And subscribe.
And send us money.
Or, yeah, that's fine too.
I mean, I
want you to learn and be curious about things. But money is good.
I want to go to Africa. Oh, wait, Italy. We decided Italy at the end of last episode. Yeah.
All right. So basic summary. Okay, we have this guy, Dr. Livingstone, Dr. David Livingstone.
I presume.
Yes. He went to Africa. He was a missionary, anti-slave person. But he was in Africa trying to find the source of the Nile. And he, quote, disappears. But really what happened is he was running low on supplies. He had a lot of people desert. He had a lot of people die because they got sick.
Yes, I think perhaps my favorite factoid is the people who deserted the expedition were like, no, I'm not a deserter. He's dead.
He died.
You know, whatever. It's all fine. Just don't go look in the Nile.
Yeah, don't go look for him. Yeah.
It's not important.
He's really dead. So they deserted, and he fell in with some Arab slave traders that did not want him communicating basically with the outside world because they knew, even though they were being nice to him and taking care of him, he was very much against what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah, and they didn't want Stanley to, or they didn't want Livingstone to be able to talk about where they were and things. Yeah. So then there's this guy, Henry Morton Stanley, who was actually named John Rowlands when he was born. Had a heck of a life.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
It was a lot.
So there was some abuse, some abandonment, jumping ship after he joined the Navy despite being Welsh.
He fought for the Union and the Confederacy, even though he was Welsh.
Because his girlfriend at the time, who really stopped being part of the story after she sent him a dress.
They never got married. Yeah.
Again, I love you. I'm not going to another country and fighting a civil war for you, I don't think.
So, we're at the point in our story where Livingstone is lost in the jungle. And Henry Morton Stanley, who has kind of started doing some freelance newspaper work and writing.
He's kind of a con man, right? Like, is that generally...
I don't know if con man is the right word.
He negotiated a deal to get out of Turkish prison, and he has the gift of gab, for sure.
He definitely has the gift of gab, and he definitely has not set on what he wants to do with his life, and he definitely has an adventurous spirit. And I will say, hindsight, I would think he has very low self-esteem that probably pushes him to do impossible things, if that makes sense. Like, he needs to prove himself.
Yeah,
for sure.
Maybe they'll love me now after. Yeah.
Okay. So we left the story when he is trying to get the editor of the Herald newspaper.
Wait, you didn't say trying. You said he convinced them.
Okay, he did convince the editor of the Herald newspaper to let him go find Dr. Livingstone.
The New York Herald, right?
Yes.
Because he's okay.
And so the deal was he was going to go to Africa. Again, it's not a simple journey. It's not like you're just going to walk around and find the guy.
Yeah, walking to Africa from the United States is difficult.
No, I meant like once you get there, you're not just going to walk through the jungle. You got porters and luggage, and they had to carry all, like when they were getting supplies for the trip, like you think, okay, well, we need food and blah, blah, blah. They took some food, but a lot of what they took, they'd take beads and cloth and things to trade for food, but also to basically like pay their respects. Because as they're traveling, this is not a not monogamous, that's not the word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for?
Monotonous?
Homogenous. Homogenous people. Like every 20 miles you're going through a different tribal
warlords.
land.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
And some are friendly, some are not friendly. What they found as they're walking, a lot of these groups are extraordinarily hostile to them because they hear this big caravan coming and they think it's the slave traders that are basically going to come.
Oh, interesting.
Decimate their village
so
and kidnap
I think we should,
everyone.
put it in the comments. But I feel like the whole slave trader thing, though awful,
it was a piece of history that
nobody knows. Not many people know about.
Yeah, it kind of gets overlooked. Like, all of us know about slavery and the American Civil War and
Right.
all that jazz, but how it actually happened and how the Arabs had settled a bunch of Africa and
It wasn't just Arabs though, so I don't want to make it out
right,
like it was.
right.
It's only going to be about pointing fingers at a different culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, but it is a whole. We could do a whole podcast on it.
Yeah.
So if you guys want a podcast on it, comment that and we will research that. So, like I said, it's not just about walking into the jungle to find Livingstone. He has to hire people. He has to get supplies. He has to do all of this stuff.
Get a megaphone and just shout.
Then they are traveling, and like I said, they're traveling through sometimes hostile territory, sometimes not.
But okay, so they're going up the Nile, though, right?
No, they start in Zanzibar for this one, and head toward Lake Tanganyika. So they're starting at that island in Zanzibar, cross over to the mainland.
Is that in Wichita where the little pygmy hippo is?
No, but that's where Jane Goodall did all of her
Oh,
work.
okay.
So
Yeah.
yay for that. And then they're, like we said last time, like, picture Africa. They're actually starting on the east side and traveling toward the west.
Okay.
Okay. So he's got to do all this, hostile tribes, and then you add to it the fact that a lot of the people he brought from Europe and America and people that he hired have absolutely no resistance to any of the malaria and fever, dysentery, etc., etc. Now, it did mention in one of the books that he had a little bit more immunity because he had spent some time living in New Orleans in the American South. So he was better off than some of his English compatriots. Ouch. But
well, good job, New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's only prevented disease for once.
And I can't remember which journey this was on because he went through Africa multiple times. But one of the journeys, he started out as 180 pounds. And because he had dysentery and malaria, at one point, he was down to 100 pounds. Can you imagine? Yeah. He was like 6 foot something and 100 pounds.
Can I show the picture that I just pulled up on my phone with the camera?
Picture.
So yeah, that's Africa, and I just I don't know why in my head the world doesn't fit together like that, but yeah, I guess they would come kind of like through Spain, right? Or
they'd go down through the Suez Canal.
Go through the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
I think you said that on the last episode.
So definitely.
So they would head towards Spain.
Yes. So, like I said, I'm not going to talk much about place names, just simply because you have to be really looking at a map. And not only that, but a lot of the place names have changed. Because when the era of colonization was happening, they named them all like, Victoria Falls.
Okay, but we're relatively in the area of Egypt, right?
No, we're further south.
Why?
Because... well, we're down on the other end of the equator.
Okay. So maybe we cut this part out, or maybe other people are as confused as I am. The mouth of the source of the Nile should be, the top of the Nile. We're not
on the Nile, Christopher.
But we're looking for Dr. Livingstone, who's going for the source of the Nile. That's why I'm confused.
Understand. No, the Nile runs... it empties into the Mediterranean Sea.
Correct. I thought we were looking for the source, not the...
Right, so we're down further south in Africa. The Nile runs the opposite way.
Right, so they didn't just go like, oh, let's just stay in Africa and go whoop and then down. They started at the mouth and went up?
No, the mouth is way up here.
Okay. The butt, then, of the
Look
Nile.
at a map. Africa.
I was looking at
I know,
a
I'm
map.
just saying. Africa can be kind of confusing, but if you are watching us on YouTube, this is kind of the map of where they were. This is from the book Dark Safari. And so they started looking for Livingstone. They started on this island, Zanzibar, here, and went west across Africa. And they ended up close to Lake Tanganyika here. Okay? But again, that's why I'm not going to use a lot of place names, because it's so confusing. Get a map. Look at a map. And just trust me, it was rough going. Okay. So, Stanley heads out to find Dr. Livingstone. Like I said, at one point in his journey, everyone is sick. Everyone's got dysentery. They're running out of food. Some villages won't sell them food. It's a lot. But they find Dr. Livingstone in Ujiji. So, I know.
That's fun to say.
It is fun
Yeah.
to say. So basically what happens is they get word that, it's kind of funny, all of these natives are like, you're looking for Dr. Livingstone? And Stanley's like, yes. And they're like, well, there's a white guy with a big white beard in this village over here. Is that him? And basically Stanley at the time is like, it has to be, because he's the only one that's supposedly in the area.
Wait, are they just finding a trail of different white guys with beards, or does it turn out to be him?
It does turn out to be him. So they got word that he was in this village. Yeah. And basically what happened is they all dressed up as nice as they could and made their way into the village with all their flags flying. And one of Livingstone's servants met Stanley and his group. And Stanley was like, is Dr. Livingstone here? And the servant, and his name escapes me, and I feel so terrible. I can't remember what his name is, but he was basically like, yeah, let me take you to him. And so they take him to Dr. Livingstone, and Stanley says, Dr. Livingstone, I presume? And that is that. He found Dr. Livingstone. Now, some reports say that he didn't actually say that. And weirdly enough, it just so happens, Stanley was a huge note taker. He wrote in his diary every night. And wouldn't you know, the pages that had that story in it were ripped out. That story doesn't exist in his diaries anymore. So we don't know if he really said that or not. But
Is that such a classic line that they had to preserve it? Or is it just...
Well, so what happened is Stanley was still sending dispatches back to the papers, right? So he's in Ujiji, kind of in the middle of Africa, but people are going back to Zanzibar, so the mail is happening.
He's no longer with the slave traders then.
Livingstone is, yeah.
But you said that they weren't letting him send mail.
Right, but Stanley can.
Oh, Stanley. Okay, got it.
Stanley is sending dispatches back to Zanzibar that are making their way back to the newspapers.
So he wanted to sound really cool for his news story.
Right, and so he wrote Dr. Livingstone, I presume, and that was the story.
Got it.
Now, weirdly enough, when he got back to the mainland, he super regretted that, because it had become the 1870s version of a meme. Gotcha. People would pass each other on the street and be like, Bob, I presume, and in theater they were making fun of him, because I guess a lot of people thought, he had very much tried to hide his Welsh heritage, and he presented as an American. He was American all the way.
Yeah, there's no way an American would say that, even in the 18th. Right? It's not a very American thing.
And the English people didn't necessarily love the fact that he was an American, because they were like, well, Livingstone's kind of our guy. Why is this dumb American going to find him? And also...
Is it dumb Welsh that much better to your common upper society Londoner?
No,
okay,
no. But also, the Americans and the English were still not on great terms, especially because of some things that had happened during the Civil War.
Like when they burned our capital? Yeah.
So... They weren't on great terms. They didn't love the fact that Stanley was an American. They saw Americans as being unpolished and rough people.
Not much has changed.
It kind of became a joke that this rough American is Dr. Livingstone, I presume. And so it became a joke. And so Livingstone kind of always regretted having sent that ahead, because then it was so ingrained that he couldn't change that.
Got it. So, I mean, what would you have said? Holy crap, my feet are tired. Seems like a worse thing to say.
Well, and that's that quote that I read at the beginning of the first episode was basically Stanley was like,
what else am I going to do?
Yeah, should I hug him? I don't know. He's kind of Livingstone kind of had a reputation for being kind of a grouchy old man. And so Stanley's like, I don't know if he wants me here. I don't know if he's going to be happy to see me. Should I shake his hand? Should I say, he didn't know what to say. And I guess that's what came out. Supposedly. We don't know if it's real, but...
I still think What's Up, Doc? To steal the Sesame Street episode is the best.
So he finds Dr. Livingstone, and Livingstone is still very ill and still very low on supplies. Even though he's kind of fallen in with these Arab traders, he's still not great. So Stanley gives him the supplies, and they wait a few weeks, and Livingstone's feeling much better.
So supplies like medicine, probably.
Medicine and food and good food, like fatty food,
Okay, gotcha.
So Stanley takes to Livingston, Livingston takes to Stanley. And some people kind of think it's because Stanley would have been about the same age as Robert was.
I see.
And Stanley and Robert both had experiences in the U.S. Civil War, and they kind of think that he was kind of like a stand-in son, basically.
What happened to Livingston's other children? Did he have a relationship with him, or did they kind of blame him for...
When Stanley came to meet Livingston, he had letters from his other children, but so they still communicated with him, but I think that it was a rather strained relationship.
That seems reasonable based on what we talked about in the first episode.
Especially because Mom was dead at this point. And
yeah.
So Livingston took Stanley, Stanley took Livingston, and they got along well to the point where they decided to, like, you'd think Stanley's a newspaper guy and would rush back with the story. But Stanley found him in November and stayed with him till March. And they actually went together on a kind of a mini expedition around Lake Tanganyika, still kind of looking for the head of the Nile.
Did they ever find it?
No.
Okay.
So, that's where this famous story comes from. Like I said in the first episode, we could do entire podcast episodes on any one of these expeditions, any one of these days, meetings, anything, but we're kind of trying to get the broad overview.
Right.
In March, Stanley heads back to America. Livingston decided that now that he had these new supplies, he didn't want to be necessarily, quote unquote, rescued, and decided to stay in Africa and continue to search for the head of the Nile. So this all happens in 1871, is when Livingston and Stanley meet. By 1873, Dr. Livingston had died of dysentery. I know.
How many people in history die of dysentery?
So many, especially in Africa. Okay, so apparently he was fighting dysentery and malaria at the same time. He passed away, and then the men that he was with, his servants, apparently really loved this guy, actually. And it sounds kind of rough, but they took his organs out, buried his heart and his organs under a tree in Africa, because Stanley, his heart was in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
But it also had an actual, scientific reason. They basically took everything out, let him dry in the sun, and mummified him.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounded like mummification.
Yeah, so that they could wrap his body up and carry it 1,000 miles back to Zanzibar, put it on a ship, and have him buried in England. So you don't want to just take,
right.
So they prepared the body for the journey. Sent him back to England. He was buried 11 months after he died. Finally made it back to England. We talked in the first episode about his arm and how he had tried to fight that lion and his arm was messed up. So this is when the doctors were trying to identify him, because he'd been not embalmed, more like a mummified.
Right.
And, his organs are all gone, so I'm sure he's just kind of shrunken,
Yeah. He's dried up,
yeah. So, they used his arm to positively identify him. He had a big state funeral.
Okay, London needs to decide if they like this guy or not.
I think there was some public pressure, because, his family was basically destitute at this point.
Right.
And, people were like, but it's Livingstone, the famous missionary. We have to do something special.
We presumed about him.
Yeah. But his family's like, we can't afford any sort of cool funeral. So they voted, and the government paid for his funeral. He was actually buried in Westminster Abbey.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm. He's buried in Westminster Abbey on April 18th, 1874. Stanley was one of the pallbearers.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. And it was paid for by the British Treasury. He was buried with a wreath from Queen Victoria and then a palm branch from Africa.
Oh,
so he
cool.
had both, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
One thing, we didn't talk about Kalulu. Kalulu. Okay. So Kalulu was acquired by Stanley on this trip, which is terrible.
Is Kululu a person?
Kalulu is a person. Let me find his picture. That's why I had the book open and then I closed it for something else. Kalulu was given to Henry Morton Stanley on this trip by...
Given to
by a Arab slave trader. Kalulu was 8 years old.
Oh, God.
I know. So Kalulu was 8 years old when he was given to Henry Morton Stanley on this trip. His original name was Ndugu Mahale, which meant my brother's wealth. And Stanley didn't like that name, so renamed him Kalulu, which basically means, like, little antelope. Which, whatever. I don't know. I mean, like, I can picture it both ways. Like, this little 8-year-old boy being like, that's not my name. But then also, you think of Ethan when he was 8, and if you were like, your new name is Heavy Tank, he'd be like, yeah, I'm Heavy Tank, so I don't know, but his real name was not Kalulu. Anywho's,
Heavy Tank, okay.
Yeah,
all right.
So Kalulu, here's a picture of him. He's in here in the middle. He is this adorable little 8-year-old boy. Look at him. He's just adorable.
With a rifle?
With a rifle.
Okay, cool.
Stanley really took to this kid. And, like, he was a servant, right? But then also sort of his adopted son, sort of, like... So, Stanley said that this kid was smart as a whip, basically, and knew how to do things right. And so, actually overtook some of Stanley's adult servants, like, in rank, because the kid could do it better than they could, and, Stanley preferred Kalulu to the older ones. So, we're talking about Kalulu, this sweet little 8-year-old boy that became Stanley's servant / adopted son / porter / whatever. So Stanley really liked...
I don't feel good about this.
I don't
anyway,
love this
keep
either.
going, yeah.
But Stanley really liked Kalulu.
Good.
But it was like a super mixed bag. So when they went back to England, he actually enrolled Kalulu in boarding school and gave him an education and did all that. But then when it was time to go back to Africa, Stanley's like, okay, I'm pulling you out of school. We're going to Africa. You're going to be my porter again. And then at one point...
you got to have your porter.
Right? At one point, Kalulu tries to desert with some of the other people because life is hard out on these expeditions. And he got the same punishment as everyone else. He was clamped in slave chains and basically drugged through the jungle. So...
I don't like this story at all.
I don't love any of it. Yeah. Right, okay. But
super glad we detoured to talk about,
I know, I thought Kalulu needed his own little... Because he was so adorable. His pictures, you just feel bad for the kid. And then you kind of... It was not right.
Yeah.
But you kind of wonder if he had stayed with the Arab slave traders, what would have been his fate there, too. None of it's good.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, none of it's good. Yeah. All right. So Stanley gets buried. No, Livingstone gets buried in Westminster Abbey. And we talked about Kalulu because Kalulu was actually in the funeral procession as well.
Got it.
He got to go and do the funeral procession. And then at this point is when he gets enrolled in boarding school because he's back in England and things like that.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay?
Yeah.
So Stanley goes on to do other things. He writes a book about his travels.
Which is fictitious.
Again, he was a bit of a compulsive liar. And the book was fairly successful, but then they put him on like the lecture circuit. It was not successful at all, because they kind of started him out at some scientific lectures, but he was a newspaper guy and he was telling a story.
Right.
And he's this rough American. And so the English science community is like, you're an idiot. And the lecture thing didn't go well. Okay. So then he goes on another assignment with the newspaper. He goes back to Africa to see the British fight the Ashanti. So this was a tribe that, from what I understand, the leader of this tribe was not the smartest guy. So basically, there were colonists in the area, and this tribal leader kidnapped the colonists and was basically just taunting the British just because. And so the British were like, all right, we got to go get these people because this guy is taunting us and he's making a big deal of it. So the British basically decimated this guy and his tribe to get the hostages. But that was another trip that that Stanley took. Then he was offered an assignment to continue Livingstone's search to find the source of the Nile, and that was paid for together by the Herald and the London newspaper, The Telegraph. Neither one of them wanted to foot the entire bill, so they kind of went in on it together, and Stanley wrote for both of them. So he's going to head back to Africa to finish what Livingstone started. Now, before he left, he met a woman named Alice Pike. They vowed to get married. And nearly 3 years later, like to the point, okay, the boat was called the Lady Alice. The boat that they were using on like the Congo and the Nile was called the Lady Alice for this woman. And 3 years later, when Stanley comes back, she forgot. She didn't forget. She married someone else. And so that was extraordinarily disappointing, especially because this was the second time. He had also been promised to marry a lady named Katie Gow before he left for the Livingstone trip. And she married someone else by the time he got back. So this poor man.
How does that work? Like, he was just gone longer?
He was gone long enough, and they didn't want to keep waiting, and so they married somebody else. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Like, you put yourself in their shoes. Like, I guess at some point you're worried, like, you know, as a woman back then, you basically needed to get married.
Right.
You know, okay. And so if your betrothed is on a hunt, or not a hunt, but on an expedition in Africa, and you're afraid he's not going to come back, like, you better get on the ball so you're not an old maid, I guess. I don't know. But this happened to him twice.
Women are not not good to him, it sounds like.
No. So, the expedition to find the source of the Nile started in 1874. They started in November 1874 with 347 men. Okay? By February 1875, so what's that, 4 months later? They only had 205 left.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 45 died, 89 deserted, and then 8 were left behind sick. Like, they left them in villages for people to take care of. They explored Lake Victoria and kind of went on. After that expedition, he was recruited by King Leopold II of Belgium.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this guy...
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Belgium and what they did in Africa is definitely its own show.
Yeah, that could definitely be its own show. So just know King Leopold, not an upstanding young man.
No.
King Leopold II. So King Leopold basically recruits Stanley and is like...
Because Belgium wanted a presence in Africa because they felt left out.
Right, because England, France, Germany, they all had a big presence in Africa. And Leopold was like, well, we want a slice of this pie.
We want to be cool, too.
And he did it by dastardly means. Uh-huh. Yeah, he kind of... He was... To the Europeans, he was like, I want this to be open to everyone, and slavery is bad, and I'm just this neutral party trying to, like, make these, you know, contracts with all these different people so that everyone can have a peace, da-da-da-da. And in the meantime, he's, like, putting it all in his pocket and voiding contracts, and it was a whole thing.
Yeah.
But he recruited Stanley to basically go in and open the Congo. So It was a terrible trek. They had, man, it was just a mess. They had steamboats and they didn't work very well, and there was all these falls, like waterfalls, and in fact, poor Kalulu died on this trip. They went over the falls and he drowned.
Oh, jeez.
I know, he was only 15-ish.
Oh, jeez.
I don't think anybody
really
knows.
At the time or something?
Oh, no, he wasn't. That was just temporary punishment.
Okay.
But a lot of people died drowning trying to get over these falls, and it was terrible. It was a bad trip. In the end, though, they did end up setting up basically 22 commercial stations, like garrison stations that were supposed to be safe. They put a fleet of steamboats on the river, they built roads, and they even built a short section of railway. They talked to a lot of the local tribes and kind of secured those contracts for Belgium, which did not go well for those people. Okay. After all of that,
yeah.
In 1887, Stanley takes his last trip to Africa to go rescue Amin Pasha. So Pasha is I believe it's a Turkish military rank.
Okay.
So the guy's name was Amin, and then they call him Amin Pasha. So you'd be like Chris Pasha, right?
Yeah.
Got it? Okay.
Yeah.
So they go to rescue this guy. He was, I believe, the governor of Equatoria, and he'd been cut off kind of by warring tribes and needed supplies. Expedition.
So he's a military leader, but no longer.
I think from what I understand, he was sort of like in the military, but it'd be like if a Kentucky colonel was the governor of something. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, so he kept that name.
He was both. He was a political leader and a military leader.
As far as I understand, yeah. He was kind of an enigma, too, because he was sort of from Germany and also, like, Turkish, and nobody could really pin him down.
Okay.
So this started out extraordinarily poorly because Stanley was under some pressure to go find him and help him.
Okay.
Stanley was sick, like, all the time. Like, I don't know if you know, but after you've had malaria, it doesn't just go away. Like, you can have recurring bouts of fever and stomach ache, and it actually can mess with your brain and cause mood disorders and paranoia, and It is a terrible thing. And so he was very much struggling with all of this still. They had planned to use some of the steamboats that he'd left on his last expedition and kind of use the steamboats and the stations, and it was kind of like, we've already kind of got a trail, right?
Yeah.
But then when they got back there, they found that the people they had left in charge of those things just didn't keep them going.
Right.
And the steamboats were all rotted out. Like, there was no food at the stations. Like, nothing was going well for them. So, they finally met the Amin, the Pasha, and by the time they met up with him, they were basically the ones that needed to be rescued.
Okay.
And Stanley was very upset. Like, it was a whole thing because he had promised to go rescue this guy.
Yeah.
But Stanley's group was in dire straits. And this guy, when they got there, like, the warring tribes were still there. Yeah. You know, there was still a threat. But this guy was kind of like, I'm not sure that we want to be rescued. And kind of dilly-dallied and wishy-washied. And it was months before the guy decided or not. And finally, Stanley got to the point, like, we're leaving. Yeah. You can come or you cannot come. But we are going.
Right.
And they finally decided to go with him. But then Stanley was like, these people. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was like 4 of the main guys, like Amin Pasha, and then like the doctor on the trip, and then 2 of the other kind of top guys in that particular expedition. When they evacuated the country, between the 4 of them, they had like 265 packages that needed to be carried. And they only had like 250 porters for the whole, both expeditions together.
Right.
And Stanley's like, my guys are not going to carry all this stupid stuff that you want brought out through the jungles, right? Like, leave it, we're going, you know? Like, just leave it. So they finally leave. They get back to not quite Zanzibar, but the city on the coast,
right?
Like across.
They would
from
take
Zanzibar.
them to
Yeah, and it's controlled by the Germans, and the Germans are very excited that they're there and throw them a fantastic party. Now, Stanley has done this before.
Right.
And understands that after you've been in the jungle and had malaria and this and that, you don't go drinking. So they gave him wine, but he would dilute the wine with water.
Yeah.
So he could have a little wine, but he knew his body wasn't ready for this.
Yeah.
Amin Pasha apparently did not get the memo and got so drunk he went outside and fell off the balcony. So after all this, the guy they're trying to rescue ends up unconscious off a 15-foot balcony. Now, he did recover.
Good.
Apparently he was not well after that. So they got back to civilization basically in 1889 is when he fell off the balcony. They left him in this city to be taken care of by the doctors and things. And he got better, but he got better. He was blind in one eye. The Germans had kind of convinced him to go work for them, and so he kind of went back out into Africa. This was 1889, and by 1892, he'd been murdered by slave traders.
Got it.
So that was kind of all for naught. So, yeah. When he returned to England, like, at first everybody was really excited and happy. But then things started to come out about what happened on that expedition.
Like the first one for Belgium?
Yeah. And so Stanley was a, shall we say, strict disciplinarian.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also very, well, that's not motivated, but like, he wanted to do it and he wanted to be first. So he took part of the group and went to find Amin Pasha and left some of the group as a rear guard in this village with basically no food, no resources, nothing. And a bunch of them starved to death and died of malaria and dysentery. So that was bad.
Not great, yeah.
Yeah. One of the guys that they had hired to help them on their way was a very famous slave trader. He was kind of helpful, but he was also conning them the whole time and kind of doing his own thing. So stories came out about that. And then I warned you that this would be a disturbing, kind of things on these episodes. There was one incident that happened that was disturbing enough that we are not going to talk about it. But if you want to look it up, it's called the Jameson Affair. It was the grandson of the guy that started Jameson Whiskey.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
His name was James Jameson, and he was with them on the trek. And one of the things that he got himself into was real bad. I told you about it. We're not going to talk about it on the podcast, but if you want to look it up, you can. But be prepared; it is not okay. So the Jameson Affair happened. That stuff sort of started coming out in England, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, that is not okay." And so a lot of blame was going around. By this point, Stanley had married Dorothy Tennant.
Finally.
No, this is a different one. This one
is... No, I mean, he finally got married.
He finally got married. Yeah. Dorothy and him had met before he left on this adventure, and they had flirted and this and that, and she very much led him on, and he asked her to marry him, and she said no. She said no.
Okay.
Even though she was the one that kind of started the whole thing. Like, she kind of pursued him.
Yeah.
When he got back to England, he didn't really want to see her, but she just kind of kept showing up at parties that were being thrown for him.
On purpose?
On purpose.
Okay.
And they had it out a few times, and finally she said, if you just ask me, I'll marry you. I was just scared last time. So finally he asked her and they got married, and then that was that. Apparently they
You can't
really
see me frowning on
I
the
know.
Substack, but yeah, I'm just okay.
So apparently they were really companionable. Um Again, like I said in the first episode, there were questions about Stanley's
Sexuality?
sexuality and also about Dorothy's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so some people think it may have been just they really liked each other, got along, hung out, and it was convenient.
Got it.
Um, but it wasn't like, you know, a wild love affair of some sort.
Gotcha.
So anyway, by that point, by the time things really started heating up about what happened on that expedition, Stanley and his new wife and his mother-in-law had all gone
Fun. Yeah.
to do like a lecture circuit in America and in New Zealand and in Australia.
So they missed a lot of the controversy.
They missed a lot of the controversy around that. So after that, they got back to England, and Dorothy really wanted Stanley to be a member of Parliament and pushed him into it. He was like, I'm not campaigning, I'm not writing speeches, I'm not kissing babies, I'm not doing any of it. But if I win, I'll do it. So she basically ran the whole thing, got him elected. He hated every second of it. And after his first term was up, he was like, I'm done. I'm never doing that again. They ended up adopting a baby.
How old is he at this point?
Oh gosh, how old
50s?
is he? Well, that was in like 1890, probably 1892. And when was he born? Let me relook. He was born in 1841, so yeah.
About 50.
50.
Okay, yeah.
So they adopted a baby, a son, and named him Denzel Morton Stanley. And I looked this kid up.
Yeah.
There's like nothing. I found him on Find a Grave, and that's about it. I found that he did have a record. He fought in World War One. Didn't die in World War One because he didn't die until like 1959 or something.
Oh wow, okay.
But there's like nothing. I could find nothing on this kid. But they did adopt him. By 1903, Stanley suffered a stroke that left him paralyzed on one side of his body.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up dying in 1904.
It's an interesting symmetry with Livingstone in that case. You know, not being able to use one of his arms.
Oh. Yeah. So he died in 1904, and one of his last requests to Dorothy is that he wanted to be buried next to Livingstone in Westminster Abbey. Unfortunately, all of this stuff had and was still coming out about
Got it.
You know, what was happening. And by this point, things that were happening or that had happened on that expedition, they'd kind of been talked about.
Yeah.
But now reports were coming out about what was happening in the Congo with the King of Belgium.
Oh, the things he enabled to happen.
Yes, yeah. And people blamed Stanley for kind of opening the Congo and allowing that to happen. And when I say bad things, it is estimated that over 3 million Congolese died basically at the slavery hands of King Leopold II.
Yeah.
It was not good. They were being forced to work to get rubber.
Yeah.
It was the big thing. They were harvesting rubber. Like and apparently things that would happen is like they'd go out and kidnap the kids and the women and make the men work in the fields to earn the kids and the women back. It was not good. If you didn't want to work, they would cut off your hands, cut off your ears, send them back to the king to prove that they were being disciplinary. Like, it was bad. So all of this stuff was starting to come to light as Stanley died.
Got it.
And so they didn't want him buried in Westminster Abbey.
That's fair.
So he was cremated and buried in the village cemetery in Purbright, England. So that's where he ended up. After he died, he had kind of started on another book, but they didn't say this in the books, but I gotta believe, based on all of the things that happened, based on reports of his temperament, based on reports of his focus, and things that were going on, I gotta believe that the malaria and the dysentery and all of that stuff really affected his brain function in his later years. Because they said that he would sit down, when he was writing his first report of his travels, he would work, they said, from 6 a.m. to midnight and wrote like 300,000 words in like 2 months or something unbelievable.
Yeah.
And when he sat down to write a second one as he was older, they said he'd get 2 sentences to a paragraph and then couldn't focus anymore.
Interesting.
So I don't know if it was dementia or if it was the effects of all the times that he'd lost weight, gained weight, lost weight, dysentery, you know, all of these things in Africa. But I don't get the sense that he was mentally well when he passed away. So Dorothy finished all his books, or finished his book.
Yeah.
Based on his journals and letters and things. And that was a whole big controversy too, because some of the people on the expedition, basically, they started blackmailing her. Like, I know things that happened on the expedition. If you don't want me to tell you those things, or you don't want me to publish these journals that I have, you should probably pay me to get them from me. You know, kind of that situation.
Interesting.
And that no kid popped up again. You remember him from the first episode? Yeah. He did the same thing. He's like, I have information on some things that we did in Turkey that I will publish.
Do we know what those are?
We don't know what they are. The no kid was a big one, and then Henry's, he wasn't a porter. I can't remember the name that they used for him, but he was one of Henry's servants on one of the expeditions. He was also a youngish man, so there are suspicions as to what those things were.
Gotcha.
If you catch my drift. So Dorothy ended up buying all those letters back and just burned them, so nobody knows what that stuff is. But that's his story. His legacy and Livingstone's legacy, obviously very mixed, because...
Though, if we hadn't done this, we would have just thought he presumed once.
Right, yeah. I mean, the whole colonization thing, not good.
No.
You know, no. We talked about 3 million Congolese dead and all the atrocities committed. After the Belgians owned it, it was Zaire from 1971 to 1997, and that was run by a terrible dictator. And then now it is, that area is the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is seemingly better.
Right.
But still one of the poorest countries in the world. I think I read like 72% of the population lives on like $1.90 a day or something.
Jeez.
Yeah, like 42% of the kids like starve. It's just not a good scene.
Huh.
And they say a lot of it can be kind of traced back to all the things that happened with Stanley and the colony. And it wasn't only Stanley.
Right.
You know, like every country in Europe was fighting to have a colony in Africa.
That they then economically exploited.
Right, exactly. And so it wasn't all Stanley, but, you know, he's very closely tied to it because of his ties to the King of Belgium.
Right.
Even, you know, when all the stuff was coming out about what the king was doing in the Congo, Stanley would write letters to newspapers and be like, no, I know this guy. That can't be true. He's like, I can see that, you know, it's difficult to run that massive of an operation, and there's going to be leaders that are a little bit out of sorts, and yeah, those things probably happen, but it's certainly not happening on a large scale.
Right. It's not systemic. It's one bad actor.
Right, exactly. And so he's kind of always been tied to King Leopold because he worked for him.
Tied himself to King Leopold.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Interesting.
So, I know there's a lot that we left on the table just because it is a lot to talk about.
That's enough,
Yeah. So, if you are interested in this topic, definitely, you know, comment, and we can do more if you tell me which specific part you want to know about. If you want to know about King Leopold or specific expeditions or whatever, we can definitely do another episode about it.
Yep.
But I encourage you to read. Like I said, these are the books I used. I used Dark Safari and Dr. Livingstone, I presume. Both of them were very good. I will tell you, I found this one much easier to read. This one was more
Approachable.
Yeah, approachable. It was more like a story. It was kind of humorous. But the other one was really good too. So anyway, I guess until next time, just remember, history is weird, especially if you read the footnotes.